Hello and welcome to our Teach Solas YouTube channel, and this is an interview we have today with Colin Holmes, who has written this book called Recovering Life. How are you doing today, Colin?
I'm good, John. Thank you. Yeah, staying in the dry and the wet outside, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit wet today in both parts of Ireland. Colin, yeah, if you can just maybe for our viewers and listeners, tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're pastoring a church, just a bit of background, and then we'll go into the book after that.
Cool. Yeah. Look, thanks, John. Thanks for this opportunity. Yeah, my name's Colin Holmes. I am living in Naddesha over in Waterford since 2010, but I don't have to keep talking too long for you to work out. I'm not from Waterford originally. I'm from County Antrim up north, and I'm married to Ali, and we have 3 kids. And so currently I'm the pastor of Ferrybank Christian Community Church. I've been part of a team here which saw the church planted back in 2011. So yeah, I'm pastor with the church, and I'm also leader of the European Christian Mission Team in Ireland and Britain, which sounds very grand, but at the moment it is exciting. It's 10 people who are working in discipleship and church planting across the Republic, Northern Ireland, and then over in England as well. So yeah, I'm responsible for supporting people. Yeah, Wednesday morning's usually my day off, so you might find me outside, not so much today, enjoying nature. I have got a bit of a sourdough bread on the go today, so I could be baking or cooking in the kitchen, or I have a love of words, so you'd find me in a good book, particularly poetry on my day off. Enjoy a bit of poetry, either reading it or sometimes the odd poem will fall out of me here or there. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Great to hear a bit about your background, and it sounds like you've a lot of different things happening in your life, being a pastor and being part of other ministry as well. And you, when did you kind of, maybe if we can talk about your book, Recovering Life, when did you decide to write it? Like, were you always interested in writing? You talk about poetry there. I know it's a bit different going from poetry to writing a book. So when did you kind of decide, and kind of, if you can give us maybe a timeline on how you got to the writing of the book, because it covers, you can go into this, it covers a specific kind of event in your life. So
Sure.
maybe that kind of spurred it on as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, John. Like, in one sense, it was very gradual and progressive. And the other sense, as you say, it was about a health event, which really was the stimulus behind this and the substance of the book. So I suppose I love words. I communicate and connect with people. It's part of what I do. It's part of who I am, but it's also part of what I do. And particularly, I think I'd been writing blogs. So I'd just been writing. I had a blog on faith and sport, and then also one on faith and culture, and just connecting with culture and how that connects with our longings which are ultimately fulfilled in Jesus. So yeah, I've been blogging and writing that way quite naturally. Then in July 2020, in that wonderful COVID season, it was the summer, first summer we'd known a bit of freedom. I had an unexpected bleed on my brain, and so completely out of the blue, and it took me about 6 months to recover. So that was the specific time which the book kind of, I suppose, was birthed out of, because a lot of that time was being set aside to recover, but it was really a rich time of learning with the Lord, that I felt there was lots been poured into me. But also, as I was set aside, it wasn't just for me. I was kind of observing people around me and our culture's story, maybe, of, I don't know, I'm not going to get into COVID too much, but I think COVID showed up a lot of things that were already there. For some people, things got busier. For other people, it was like a well-earned rest, and it was almost like, for ourselves as a family, it brought us back together a bit because we're running every direction. So it made me reflect a little bit. I'd been slowed down in life with a health recovery, but it made me reflect on our culture's kind of fast-paced, stretched way of living. And I could see that in others around me. So, and also I suppose that just the feeling that for some people who are searching for a little bit more in life, more than maybe the secular story offers. Some people may have put Jesus behind them a little bit in the past. And yet, I suppose the book was written to maybe offer a different angle on that, or a fresh perspective on how Jesus gives us life. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is it was written out of something very personal, but I don't think I would have written the book if it was just my story. I think I had a strong sense that this could be a help to other people. I don't assume that everybody's story is like mine. It's not, but I think there's a bit of hopefully a bit of just honest humanity about the story that's hopeful. And yeah, so that's kind of what the book grew out of, if you like.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a story just about you, because the book, there's definitely those parts where you talk about recovering and your illness, and then there's parts of COVID. But I guess you really kind of use that maybe as a structure to bring in a lot of other things. I like your different points of, Irish interest. You talk about the O'Donovan brothers,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
also you talk very nicely, well, interestingly, about friendship in Ireland, which is a very interesting chapter I found, especially as a man. I think friendship is so important, but as Irish men, we can really kind of maybe on the surface level have friends, but not have deep friendship as we're called to, as Jesus was friends to other, and he calls us to be a friend, but also to others we're called to be friends as well, a deep relationship. Could you talk a bit maybe about that chapter, and about the different chapters, say on friendship, or the one about reconnecting the heart, and things like that, and how each chapter was kind of formed, I guess, from your experience through your life?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I'm so glad to hear you say that, John. I'd love this story to be written, or this book to be written from a place and from this place. So I think maybe even more than the cultural story, there's a bit of an Irish story to this, and there's a flavor of that in the chapters, hopefully as well. So yeah, I suppose the book, goes along a number of different aspects, you could say, of recovery, which is really aspects of our humanity. So there's recovering in nature, recovering with friends that you've just mentioned, recovering my body physically, recovering our hearts, which is more mental health and emotions, recovering our balance. My bleed affected my physical balance, but the balance I'm playing with there is a bit of work-life balance. It's almost, our vocational life or our working life. Then there's recovering in seasons of life, and then recovering in the dark, which is recovering during hard times. But yeah, the friendship one's really interesting. Like I suppose it was, yeah. My world became quite small when I had my bleed, because I was most comfortable with um, quiet, not a lot of noise, and I had limited capacity for a lot of interaction. So um, yeah, in some ways, you'll remember this phrase of being socially distanced. But in some ways, my illness socially distanced me from others a little bit, and it was only, it's, yeah, you really miss that connection with other people. And so, yeah, that was something really rich in my recovery, that I was able to maybe pour or give myself more time in and invest in. But yeah, I think it was just exploring around that idea of the anam cara, your soul friend, and maybe the depth of friendships that we have. I think sometimes maybe social media particularly, and sets us up to share widely with many people, but maybe at quite a airbrushed, superficial, reality. Whereas I suppose I was just beginning to appreciate the kind of maybe some of the harder yards you have to take in friendship. Friendship's hard going. Sometimes you have to take time into it. You have to go through things together, just even maybe boring moments in life, but just been there for other people, you know. And I particularly was appreciating the idea of, you know, having a few good friends is actually really precious. Whereas somewhere in our heads, I think we probably expect to have many, many friends. And yeah, it's just the value of a few good friends, you know, and maybe even the book of Proverbs speaks a lot about friendship in a really positive, precious way, you know. And then I'm influenced a little bit by reading others, and I know we'll get to book recommendations later, but I think Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland, and some of the way he talks about Jesus being a friend of sinners in that book was just really impactful for me. And I've been reading that before my bleed, and it just really impacted me of how Jesus was there as a friend to us, you know. So yeah, look, just exploring those different aspects of our humanity, I suppose, and looking maybe I think you're right to say in the first 3 chapters in nature, in friends, and in body, they felt like disconnects to me. They felt like things I'd become disconnected from. And I could see that in the culture around. I could see cracks, you know, like where we live so close to the land in Ireland, you know, we've such a beautiful place to enjoy, but sometimes we maybe don't appreciate it because we're just living so fast. We become disconnected. Where you know, there's people sea swimming, there's people doing DIY and growing your own stuff. There's people trying to reconnect with nature in a powerful way. And then with the friendships, I think that came during that social distancing time, but also that even now there's more and more people talking about the loneliness epidemic and how people are just really struggling. So there's that. And then with our own bodies, I think it comes from the speed of living. Sometimes we can be, I think, so much in our own heads and so much with our dreams and what we like to do that we can actually become disconnected from our own physical bodies, you know. So the start of the book looks at those reconnections, and then the middle of the book goes through the wisdom books of the Bible, actually, through Psalms for our heart, through Proverbs for our balance and working life, through Ecclesiastes for seasons in life, and then through the book of Job for suffering and darkness. But each of those is then kind of paired with the gospel. So brings us across to Jesus in each of them as well. So yeah, that's some of the way the book has come together, I suppose.
And another thing I like, at the end of each chapter, you have a poem. Is the poem by yourself, or is it
Or nearly always.
Okay.
You know, another author you'll know well, Seth Lewis, has a poem
Yes.
in there. A couple of his poems in there at the end of the friendship chapter, actually. And then one of the chapters has a psalm as a poem, and then there's an Irish blessing at the end of the book. But all the other chapters are my own poetry put out there, and all written in the same time period. So all over the past couple of years, you know. So yeah, I said a moment ago, sometimes a poem falls out of me. It kind of, some of them feel more crafted and composed than others, but some, to be honest, some of them are just almost coming to you in the rhythm of them. So yeah, hopefully it gives people, they're in there to give people space to feel and space to breathe, before they, maybe there's some reflection questions and then a prayer as well. But the book's quite reflective and feel, and I know some friends reading it who are telling me, "Oh, I'm taking ages to read this book," and I'm like, "That's okay." It's
Definitely.
actually
Yeah.
the other way around that I'd be more problems with. If someone skim read it in a couple of hours, I'd be going, "No, don't do that." It's meant to be nice and at your own
Exactly.
pace, you know.
I can definitely
Yeah.
see you, like someone taking a chapter a week or something, and like to kind of, yeah, especially with the questions as well and the prayer. You know, it's great with the questions, because often we read books and you're finished a book and you can forget a lot of the book. You know, you have to go back and reread it. But with the questions, you know, when you sit down and you ask yourself the questions related to the chapter, and it really makes you think to ponder these questions, and how is this going to impact life? Because it's not just it's not like Colin Holmes' story. It's like, you know, how to get back to God, get back to Jesus, and basically recovering life, getting back to a life living for Jesus, a life of fullness, really, you know. That's what I took from it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that that's come across to you, John, because that's what I love it to be. Do you know, some of it is a personal story, but do, do you know, I think I had a friend who read the book and said, look, it is written that way, but what was it he said? He doesn't waste much of his time, you know, there, almost goes somewhere else. So it is the weaving together of different stories, but the story of Jesus, I suppose that comes across through my own recovery. Some of that's my personal story of Jesus, but some of it's also a fair bit of it's the story of Jesus in the scriptures, do you know, and I'm unfolding that. So, but yeah, like it wasn't, the poem was meant to it was meant to be a poem, a prayer, and then the questions. I went for a P. I like my alliterations, but it was meant to be almost practice. The questions are almost meant to make you think, yeah, but they're actually more to be lived in and practiced, so that actually becomes real. But yeah, just I suppose like I was sat aside and got to view life from a slightly different angle in recovery. It's almost like the book is inviting someone to do the same. It's almost inviting you to come and sit aside a little while and think, and then get going again, you know? So yeah.
No, that's definitely great to hear. And you mentioned Dane Ortland, Gentle and Lowly, and you have some other books. You said you're a big reader. You write poetry as well. What kind of other books have really impacted you through the years, and what other books would you recommend to our viewers?
Oh, there's loads, loads. But yeah, I'll try and be selective. So yeah, there are a few Irish authors there that so Seth, I've mentioned already, Seth Lewis's book Dream Small. Paul Ritchie, is it Unspiritual to be Depressed?
Yeah.
I think Rick Hill as well, Deep Roots of Resilient Disciples. I mention those three because in some ways the topics they address are in this book a little bit as well. There's some of that flavor, and it could be that what I've read from them, I've gleaned things from and been influenced by, absolutely. But some of it is, I think, that they're dealing with things that are quite current in Ireland in some ways, you know. So I get a real Irish flavour off Seth's book and off that idea of smallness and intimacy, and do you know, and mental health's a big struggle for many people, an issue that Paul's really helpfully unpacked, and in that idea of just our cultural moment and where we are and how there is that real need to go deep, do you know, and be intentional. And in Rick's book, do you know, so I've really appreciated those books. I'd mentioned Dane Ortland's one, but not another one that, especially in the nature chapter and maybe the Ecclesiastes chapter and looking at the world around you. And I would be Andrew Wilson, God of All Things. It's just how we can see God's written around us. So those are great. And one other I just like to mention is like my book's published with Pesiod, and there's another couple of books available through Pesiod as well. And one is called Clarion Call by Paul Coulter, and it's really looking at how John the Baptist presents Jesus to us. And so it's inviting us to follow that same kind of angle and just to look at who Jesus is and why John announced him, what John says about him. It's a real book of enjoying Jesus and being spiritually refreshed in him. So Clarion Call from Pesiod. So yeah, there are a few, but I read a lot, so I could keep going with you, but I won't.
But they're great recommendations. And I saw recently Seth Lewis is in the process of he'll be releasing another book maybe next year. I'm not sure exactly when, but he signed an agreement,
Yeah,
I believe, with the Good Book Company. Yeah, great books. Paul Ritchie's book. It's funny, well, not funny, but that you mentioned Rick Hill's book, because I definitely saw a connection between this book, Recovering Life,
did
and
you?
Rick Hill's.
Yeah.
and all great books. The Paul Coltrane, we don't have that book. I must look into that book, the Paul Coltrane book you mentioned, but the rest of the books you mentioned, we will include links under the video. We stocked them here at Teach Solas. So yeah, it's really been great talking to you today, Colin, and I just want to recommend this book, Recovering Life. It's available on Teach Solas if you want to order it. And it's great, to support Irish authors and different people that are writing, and it's for anyone out there. Sometimes we get people contacting us wondering about how to start with writing a book. It's funny that earlier you mentioned about blogging, because I know Seth Lewis, Paul Ritchie, and yourself, that's I think it's really important. That's nowadays to start. If you have an idea for the book, start getting blogs out there, see how they go, see the response, and then as well, when you go to publishers, I think you can, show them the blogs. It'll show your writing style, show the audience you have there. Could you, just before we go, could you touch a bit about that, or maybe about your blog, or if you want to, we can link it as well. But or if you have any other thoughts for people out there maybe looking at writing.
Yeah, look, I still feel really early to a lot of this. To be honest, a lot of this has been, so the last few years and what I've been through health-wise, I think it's a strange thing to say, but some of this should come across in the book, but rather than being a heavy thing, it's actually freed me in a lot of ways. And it's brought a creativity about within me. So Recovering Life is a little bit of that. It's that life that Jesus gives. And so it probably really has stimulated my writing. So I'd been writing the blogs, and a friend had read one and said, "Oh, I can't wait for the book." And usually I would think, yeah, right. There's no way I'm writing a book. But actually I just thought, maybe there's something to that, and why not? And it was like, I suppose some of it's just been brave enough to put your words out there. Like I feel very unpolished. I don't feel well crafted as a writer at all, but like, it's a vulnerable thing, but you just kind of put your words out there. Like, I know the other guys you've mentioned there, like Seth particularly, is very good at being very regular about it. I'm a bit more sporadic about it, but I think you do what you can and just put it out there and start. And yeah, look, I suppose I should say as well that some of the guys I've mentioned there, the Irish authors, are guys I've reached out to help for in this process, and they've been very generous. And I'd say the same. Like, I don't have wealth of experience, but I have one book out there, and like, if anyone wanted any help or wanted to chat along the way, I'd be happy to chat. And I'm sure some of the other lads would be happy to give bits of help along the way too, but it's something that encourages me a lot, is to see this is another way of communicating Jesus. And to see people just using their creativity and using their voice. I know it's a written voice, but using their voice, their art almost, to do that. And having a collective of Irish authors doing that, writing from this place and writing who Jesus is in this place, I think it's important. And I'd really encourage people who are maybe thinking about it, maybe shoulda, well, just to go for it, and to get going.
That's great to hear, and definitely, from an Irish perspective, and Ireland as a nation, as an island, as a country, we've such a heritage in writing, and why shouldn't the same be in Christian writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, that should be, shouldn't it? Really, the Irish have a way with words, and words are so important. Literature is so important here. So that's an important way to communicate Jesus here, actually, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. So so I guess we'll finish there, Colin, and I just want to really thank you for coming on and being interviewed. And just again, it's Recovering Life, written by Colin Holmes. We have stock available, so if you're looking for that book, and all the other books we mentioned will also be linked below. So just thanks very much for watching. Thanks again, Colin. All the best, and see you next time.
Thanks, John.